I think that I won by losing. There were a lot of things that were going to be sunsetting. My business was being sold that I'd spent 20 years building. My kids are leaving the house. I knew that my time as a political leader was going to come to an end. All of these things that kind of gave me purpose and meaning and kept me busy were all sunsetting at the same time.
Hi folks, Abe Shreve here. Welcome to another episode of the Live Consequential podcast. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Brad Wilson. Brad is a close friend of mine and has played a very pivotal role in my development. Brad has had incredible success. He built a construction company, sold it for an amount that I have not been successful in getting him to disclose to me. And he's got some really big things. He's served at the top of our state government, but this particular interview isn't about what he's achieved in politics or in business or even what he's doing with the Olympics. This one is about what do you do when you get to a point in your career, you get to the end and you realize this isn't what I thought it would be. And all questions lead back to who am I and what am I becoming? So what kind of watch do you make for the guy that has every kind of watch there is? Well, you make him one that's all blacked out with a sports band. At least that's what I'm going to do today. I want to challenge you to get whatever you need to take notes, because Brad is about to rain nuggets of gold wisdom.
Well, Brad, thank you. Thanks for coming to the studio.
It's amazing, actually. It's totally your vibe, by the way. It's totally Abe Shreve.
Oh, thanks. We've worked hard on it.
Yeah.
You were in a previous episode of the podcast, and you and I go back a long ways.
We do.
Yeah. You have been wholly unsuccessful getting rid of me.
Yeah, it's been hard. I've tried. You just keep coming back into my life. No,
you're welcome.
I was telling my wife on the way here, I'm going to go see Abe, and I always enjoy time with Abe.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, when last we spoke, you had sold a new construction company that you founded with your best friend.
Yeah.
And anything happen between now and then?
Well, I don't know if there's anything interesting happening or that's happened, but yeah, I mean, there's all of us, everyone's on their own journey, and my journey continues. And I can't exactly precisely say when we last talked, but I think that I was kind of beginning my journey as Speaker of the House here in Utah. And since then that came to a close, and I had a stint as a candidate for federal office that didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to. In hindsight, It absolutely turned out the right way.
This is one of those moments that is really easy to gloss over if you're not paying attention, because it looks like a setback that was rewarded with a promotion, but that is not what this is. This is a man that has an ongoing ambition to be a force for good in the world, and when things didn't work out for him, other opportunities surfaced. And there's a lot there for us to unpack. Most of us think that we choose purpose, but in this instance, I believe purpose chose Brad, and his readiness level to accept this met the opportunity.
Some thoughts on that. One of the great honors of my life is you asked me to speak at your formal announcement.
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah.
And you said in front of all those TV cameras, you really turned out.
You did. Yeah, we're proud of you. Your mom is too. So.
Everyone laughed, and I'm like, they don't even know me, and they think they understand. And then on a personal level, as a friend, we need great leaders like you. And I was hopeful that, that you'd get what you wanted. But as a friend, there was a part of me that just didn't want my friend to go to that swamp.
Oh, you do love me, so thank you.
I mean, I think a lot of us felt like, man, Brad has balls the size of church bells, but this is headed into a fire.
Well, listen, things turn out the way they were supposed to, and a friend who also ran is back there doing the work, and I'm grateful. I was actually back in D.C. a couple weeks ago and met with Senator Curtis and productive meetings, and wish him well, and I'm doing something different. And it's turned out great.
Yeah. So you and I we meet on and off and just have lunch every other month or something like this. And we had lunch, and you had said to me, I'm going on a vacation and I have lots of time. Maybe I'll golf. And the next time we met, none of that was true anymore.
Yeah, I was going to take about a year off and just kind of reset and do some things. That was last summer, and ended up not golfing, but did take a little time to travel the world, which was nice with my wife. But in February of this year, I ended up getting appointed CEO of the 2034 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. It'll be held here in Utah, and have been powering through the learning curve and getting the team put together and putting strategies in place and managing that effort with a group of really dedicated people that love the Olympic movement, love sport, love Utah. And I'm learning a lot, and it's been really fun. So, yeah.
How big is that organization? Like, can you give us some sense of the scope of the team that puts on the Winter Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, maybe even just some big context. So we in Utah will be hosting the 34 games. We got awarded those games a little bit earlier than is normal, which is interesting because I would argue that there's no host community that's more prepared, more geographically blessed in terms of our Olympic theater of venues to host a Winter Games, because we hosted the games in 2002. And so we have a lot of people that are here working, helping, getting ready for 34 that hosted the games and helped run the games in 2002. We've got this really compact theater of venues from Snow Basin up here in Weber County to the north to Provo in the south, all of which are an hour from the Athletes Village in downtown Salt Lake. And that's just unusual to have that. Yeah. But when we do that in 34, we'll have a team of about 12 to 1,400 employees. We'll have 25,000 volunteers. We'll probably have another 25,000 people working full time for subcontractors to make that event happen. It's an event that 2.5 to 3 billion people from around the world will watch. We'll have 4,000 Olympic and Paralympic athletes descending on our state. And for a moment in time, the world's attention will be primarily, at least from a sports perspective, on this little state in the western United States called Utah. And so that's the point of arrival, and super excited about that opportunity to build on the legacy of 2002. Today, as I sit here in your office, I have 8 people on my team. It's a startup. Yeah. We're putting in place HR manuals. We're putting in place payroll systems. We're figuring out roles and responsibilities. We're doing all the things you do to run a startup organization. So it's this interesting journey.
Huh. When it was presented to you, did you know right away that you were going to do it?
No. I got a call from some state leaders saying, hey, we would like your help running the 2034 Olympics. And we're going to talk about that. And that conversation took place over a period of 3 or 4 months.
Was there ever a moment where you thought, I'm not going to do that?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if there was a moment I thought I wasn't going to do it, but there were a lot of moments that I'm like, have they lost their ever-loving mind? Like, what in the world makes anyone think I'm qualified for this job?
I've had the incredible blessing of working very close with Brad Wilson at a certain season of my life. And I can tell you that there are few people in the world that are qualified like he is. Now, he's qualified maybe not as someone who's run an organization of that size, but I know very few people that can match him point for point in bringing people together and unifying people and getting clarity and a vision, helping people move forward. But what you're seeing here, this sense of inside of him of, I don't know if they know what they're talking about. And am I really prepared to do this? This is an important theme, I believe, in great leaders. There is a sense of, oh man, do I have it in me? And that leaves something to prove, which is really important. You see that here in Brad's story.
I mean, I've run businesses successfully. I've been in politics successfully, at least you would argue that. I'm good at a lot of things, but the only Olympics I've ever participated in were as a spectator in 2002. I just bought a couple packages and went to everything for 2 weeks and loved it. I mean, we're a big sports family. We love sports. We love the Olympics, but I'm just a fan. And maybe that's actually what we need a fan. We need someone that loves this state. We need someone that knows how to run a business. in this role. But in terms of my Olympic knowledge, it's something that I didn't have a lot of. And so, yeah.
I would wager, and I want you to push back if you think I have this wrong. They were not looking for someone with Olympic knowledge. They were looking for someone with the ability to organize and lead and unify.
Well, I think fundamentally organizations, there's certain things that you have to have in all of them. And building a team, from my perspective, is the most important part of my job. Building a team that has clarity of mission, that understands what matters, what our values are, that they work well together, that they subordinate their interests to the interests of the team. All those things are important. I think I'm good at that. But yeah, I mean, it's still an interesting journey. It's so funny, too. You get into a new space. It takes you a year just to understand the language and the acronyms and how all those things work.
Yeah.
So,
tell me if this sounds familiar. When someone enters a new role, it typically takes 18 months before they're at conscious competence. Do you know where I heard that?
Probably from me.
It was you quoting Marcus Buckingham.
Well, Marcus Buckingham's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
I'm at this stage right now in some areas. I have conscious competence in some things, but they're more general leadership things. I'm consciously incompetent on a lot of the technical things still. I know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's also things that I know that I need to work on. So,
what role does having a meaningful next challenge play in how you select your objectives? Because I mean, for all intents and purposes, you built a big business, you sold it, and despite my best efforts, will not divulge what you made. But probably we could surmise that you're okay financially.
Sure.
You're no longer working to make a mortgage payment.
No, I'm volunteering my time actually right now as a CEO. I'm not being paid, and that's okay. I love this state. I love the power of sport. I wanted to contribute in that way, at least for a season. But I believe so strongly that you have to have a strong purpose. That's a thing that matters a lot to us in terms of our ability to be happy and to feel like we're making a difference. And this is a pretty compelling purpose, at least in my mind. Yeah. It's a chance to unite and inspire the world, to give the world a gift, and we're going to do a darn good job of that here in Utah. So I do think that matters a lot, but this was never part of the master plan. I think that, part of what we have to do as individuals is try to do the right things for the right reasons, but also put ourselves in the path of opportunity. And so I think that's worked out okay for me.
How do you do that? How do you put yourself in the path?
There are certain things that I think I do fairly well. And one of the things that I believe I do fairly well is I try to look a little longer term than maybe is normal, and to think about sort of what's coming at us. And I think that's a helpful skill in business as a leader. Think about the long-term things you need to be contemplating. I think American business would be better if our business leaders thought a little bit longer term and a little less short term in terms of results. I think it served me well in politics. And I also think that just understanding like that, for example, in the state of Utah, arguably one of the biggest moments we will have as a community are these games. And so when I was asked if I wanted to be involved and help lead them, I had absolutely high degree of interest in it because I knew this was a really important moment for our community.
If you go back to your early career and if we could fly back in time and say, hey, what do you think the chances are you one day are chairing you're the CEO of the Winter Olympics? What do you think young Brad says back then?
I would just laugh.
Right.
I mean, yeah, like you suddenly find yourself, life goes so fast, right? Yeah. And I just can't believe that I'm in my mid-50s right now. And it just seems like yesterday I was beginning my career, right? Yeah. But it is a progression, and I think that there's a plan for us in some way, and we just have to take advantage of those opportunities as they come up.
My observation in you, and I mean, I'd like to say me and people that do big things, is you maximize your current opportunities. You don't We don't play guarded. We don't play reserved. We do our very best to amplify our gifts and the gifts of others. And I have a philosophy that we're at all times auditioning for the next opportunity to come around. And depending on what we do, we'll see it or we won't see it.
Yeah. Well, man, I can't tell you how strongly I believe in, call it whatever you want. You can call it karma. You can call it sweet justice. You can just call it how the world works in terms of deposits you make with people. But we are so interdependent with each other. Yeah. And the way that you treat people, the way that you build trust, the way that you have credibility makes a big difference in terms of how things kind of cycle back. And so when, leaders in the state and others were looking for someone for this role, I mean, it's a real honor that they would think of me and that I had created trust with them, that they trusted to give me this opportunity to help them. And that's how I view this is my chance to give back to this state and effort that I love.
Yeah. You and I have talked at length about clarity and about building a team and making sure that expectations are clear. And in my experience, that's easy to talk about.
Super hard to do.
Yeah, and more difficult to do, which makes it the most worthy of pursuits.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, let's start with this. What do people get wrong about building team and bringing people into a combined endeavor?
I could write a book about all the things I've done to screw it up over my career, right? I mean, it's hard. It's the hardest part about being a leader, in my opinion, is figuring out how to assemble the right team that has high trust, that collaborates well with each other, and that you have that clarity. But I would just say the inverse of everything I just said is what people get wrong, right? Or make mistakes, and mistakes that I've made. You at times don't go through a thoughtful enough process to get the right people in the right seats in the organization, and you rush things. Another thing that I've done, and I think see people do all the time, is they don't have a lot of clarity about what the organization's purpose is, what the mission is. And if you don't have that, and it's not compelling, it's not going to get people excited every day. It's hard to get people motivated to do the work. But more than anything, it's giving them clarity about what their role is. And if you don't do that, if you're not clear about expectations, about not just here are the deliverables, like you need to get these things done every day and every week and every year, but here are the things that we expect from you in terms of how you're going to communicate with people, how you're going to deal with conflict, how you're going to manage disagreements, and be courageous in the way you communicate with people, but also you're very thoughtful and caring about how you do that. If you're not explicit about those things, you just don't create the culture. And I believe more than ever that culture is the secret sauce that will help an organization in a mediocre industry or a mediocre business. If you've got the right culture with the right people, it will excel.
What makes a great culture?
It goes back to people believing in the purpose of why they're there. And they believe that they're working shoulder to shoulder with people that have that same passion and same purpose. And then when you have that, it's easy to work through conflict because you're all there for a higher reason. But if you don't have those ingredients, work is a drag.
I have kind of an interesting view of this because I've certainly been an employee. I've worked with you guys for quite a while, and I've had my own business. I've had several, but my real perspective has been honed in coaching businesses.
Yeah.
Over 13,000 one-on-one calls.
It's crazy.
And a lot of times, in my experience, and I'll just state this, but I want your take on it. We define culture as excitement and passion. We're going to come early, work harder, stay later,
sure.
Which leads to emotional fatigue over time. And a lot of times we define culture as the opposite of what makes me mad. That's not good culture. We can name it. And those that will craft their culture, like you were talking about, thoughtfully define it, name it, identify the rules by which we'll play, and then reinforce those by using those and talking about them. I know for me that's made a big difference. I know that I've seen that make a difference. So how does one do that? How do you actually define your culture?
I think it happens in two ways. One is you have to be explicit about it. You actually have to define it. You have to say the words. You have to write them down. You have to talk about what your values are. You have to talk about your expectations around trust and communication. You also have to model the right behavior as a leader. It doesn't do any good to say we have an organization that is going to empower our people to make decisions, and then for the leader to not actually do that and allow people to make their own decisions, to make mistakes. And it's so common, right? Because it's not the long view, it's the short view. It's the short-term results versus a long-term perspective of how to build a culture. And it takes time. So it's not something that can be done easily and quickly.
I have an experience in my memory bank when I had made a mistake working for you. And you had me in a role where part of my job was I executed all purchase contracts as the seller.
Yeah.
And I'd missed some things, and it cost us a fair amount of money. I don't know if you remember this.
Dirty bugger, you.
I caught it.
It cost me some money.
I caught it. I was humiliated. I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Brought it to you, dragging myself on the floor.
Yeah.
But I remember you saying to me, you kind of explored with me, how does this not happen again? Mm-hmm. Like, what did you learn? And then you said, Abe, if you learning that lesson, if that's what it cost me to learn it, that was money well spent. And that burned an impression in me.
This moment burned something in my soul as a leader. To have someone that I admired so greatly look to me and say, hey, if this is what it costs for you to learn this lesson, we're all better off for it. I'll tell you, I was prepared to walk to the edge of earth for Brad and for that company. It was an unbelievable display of leadership and evidence that he's invested in the person and not just every dollar. The distinction doesn't live in values on a wall. It lives in moments like this one. And this is when you know that our culture is more than hanging in that frame. This is a leader living it. And it goes a long way.
I think if you're trying to build a lasting organization of any kind, you have to give people room to learn. You don't want them to make mistakes, and you never let anyone, drive over a cliff knowingly, right? But at least my belief is that everyone can make mistakes. Let's make as few as we can. But what's not acceptable is to make the same mistake twice. That's not okay. And so if we're not learning from our mistakes, that's where the real mistake is, and that's where the problems become real. But to do that, you've got to create a culture where people feel safe to admit they made mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a culture of safety around that, then you're going to make mistakes over and over and over again. And so that's why it's so important to create that type of environment.
What do you do when you've got someone that is not in alignment with your culture?
Well, that's hard, right? Because you might have a really good human being that just has a misfit in terms of the role they're in, or maybe it's an organizational misfit. There's two options, right? There's really not three, in my opinion. It's not an option to just let it stay that way. You either need to help them get aligned with you, and they can pivot and adjust, and that does happen, or you help them exit. I mean, it's not rocket science. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means they're not a good fit for, the organization that they're in.
How quickly do you start talking about it with them?
Well, every situation is different, right? But I have learned, and I think everyone that's been in the people business, which most managers and leaders are, these problems just grow over time.
Yeah.
There is no advantage of waiting unless there's some kind of unusual circumstance, which is really easy to justify. I mean, it has to be a really unusual circumstance to delay having those conversations with people. I have But the older I get, the more I believe we should be rushing into problems, just rushing into them and trying to solve them and fix them, because they just get bigger. People problems get bigger, culture problems get bigger. And so, you got to deal with it quickly.
It's not like the flu. It doesn't get better in a couple days.
It gets worse.
Yeah.
It gets worse.
And what also gets worse if you have someone out of alignment with your culture is...
Spreads.
Yeah, it spreads.
Spreads, yeah.
That's tragic when you have good people that get
all
lost
of those other people are looking at you as the leader.
Yeah.
And they're looking at you for two reasons. One is they want to know, do you recognize there's a cultural misalignment? And then they're also looking at you as the leader to model the right behavior. And if you are deficient on either of those two things, that you don't see it, or you see it and you don't do anything about it, their trust in you as the leader diminishes really quickly. So, I mean, it's a really risky business to be in.
This will be fun for you.
We'll see. I'll be the judge of that.
I'd like you to think of a time that the wisdom you just shared with us, you didn't have this wisdom that you just shared with us. When is a time where you either didn't rush at the problem or you let someone, stay longer than was useful? Can you talk a little bit about that and, what was the impact?
Well, without using names, this is maybe a slightly different circumstance, but one of the hardest lessons that I learned as a leader was a time when I had someone that reported directly to me in the organization, super capable, super bright, and it didn't take a terribly long time to figure this out, but occasionally you'll find people who lead up, and this person was leading up to me as my direct report very differently than they worked with others.
Oh, interesting.
And
meaning that the person that you talked to...
They led up to me really well, but in terms of their ability to work with other members of the team, not so great, not a good cultural fit. And I was slower than I should have been to recognize, because this person was doing such a great job of kind of managing me and leading me as their boss, but not working well with their colleagues and the people that reported to them. I'd onboarded this person. I'd brought them into the organization. They were reporting to me, yet there was a lot of smoke starting to kind of rise. And I was slower than I should have been at recognizing that. But here's the interesting part of this. One of this person's peers, who also reported to me, and this is, in some ways, it's both an illustration of my shortcomings, but also a demonstration of maybe a strength, which was to build a team. They kind of took the lead to help rectify the problem, to shine a light on the issue in a constructive way, and helped me understand that the culture of the organization, the success of us as an organization in terms of getting where we wanted to go, was in jeopardy because we had someone in the organization that was not aligned and not doing their job the way they should have been. And so they helped kind of me see this in a new way. And in hindsight, I should have acted even quicker, right? And ultimately, this person left the organization, went somewhere else, better fit for this person. I think they're doing great. It was really a lesson for me that you can't just assume everything is going perfectly. You've got to make sure you've got other ways to, have line of sight to it.
Yeah, how do you do that such that you're not perceived as a micromanager?
Yeah. I'm definitely not a micromanager. I probably overdo.
I can attest.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I just don't. I really believe you hire good people, you give them a lot of clarity, and then you let them go do their work. And I think it's a hard thing to do. I wouldn't change how I am. I think it fits me well, and I think it builds long-term capacity well. But it is a hard thing. And, I think the lesson that I learned from that experience is that I have to even be more clear with people about the fact that if they see misalignment in the organization, they need to feel safe about bringing it directly to whoever their leaders are.
We're not talking about me, right?
We're not talking about you.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Leadership is such an interesting topic because I don't know if there's any single topic that has been more written about or discussed in the history of the business conversation. It seems like there's always room for it. Like it's such a learner's journey, that it's
and part of it's because the world is changing so fast, right? And there are differences of how our college graduates are showing up to work now than 30 years ago when I graduated from school. The economy is different. It's so disruptive. It changes so quickly. It moves so fast that leaders, it's a harder job than it's ever been. It's absolutely a harder job than it's ever been.
Why is it a harder job?
I think because the world is changing so fast. And a fundamental ingredient of a leader is to know where things are going and to have a longer term perspective, and then to put the people and the organization on the path to match where things are heading. And when things are moving so quickly and accelerating so quickly, it's really hard to constantly, and it's a little tiring, to constantly be trying to maneuver your team and your organization into a space where it can take advantage of the opportunities that exist in a rapidly changing world.
I just ordered a book. I have a friend of mine that wrote a book called The AI-Driven Leader. Jeff Woods is his name. And the speed at which things are changing.
Sure.
And we have a workforce that is more mobile.
Sure.
In a lot of ways more informed. And in a lot of ways less structured than it's been in a very long time.
The whole AI space is tipping over the world in a way that I think we have no idea yet how to handle. And my son just graduated with a degree in computer science. Top of his class, applied to 700 positions. 2 interviews and got 1 job. But 700, and a few years ago, it would have been like shooting fish in a barrel for him. So
he would have had his choice.
Yeah, that's right. And he ended up in a really good company with a really great job, and we're really proud of him. But that just shows you like the math is different than it used to be, and it's AI disrupted.
Yeah. You said something last time we were together that was really, I'd never heard it. There were 2 things I'd love you to comment about. I'd never heard it put this way. And you were talking about, the quality of those that have a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
And that it's hard for you to trust a person that doesn't have some form of imposter syndrome. And I think many would look at you. We're all really good at looking at someone on the front of the curtain and thinking they've got it all worked out. And, what we learn as we go on is behind the curtain, everybody struggles with something. But I thought that, especially the imposter syndrome comment that you made, can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. I just kind of fundamentally believe that in some ways, inside all of us, we still feel like we're a 12-year-old, right? And I remember multiple times in my life when I'm sitting in a place or standing in a place and I'm like, good grief, these people think I know what I'm doing. Like I remember when I was Speaker of the House and we're dealing with some massive issues during COVID. Massive issues. $1 billion budget shortfalls and health issues and chaos politically. And I would get up in the morning and I'm like, I'm a state leader. I'm supposed to be figuring all this out. And like, I still feel like I'm a kid at Crestview Elementary in some ways trying to manage that. And I also had been informed by a lifetime of experience and career and lessons that I used every day. But I think to some extent, if people have so much confidence that they think they're the guy or the gal and that they know everything, those are pretty dangerous leaders because they show up without humility and they don't have an interest in learning. They are not open to other people's perspectives. They're usually terrible listeners. On the flip side, if you've got someone that's like, I'm not sure I know all the answers. I've got a skill set. I've got life experience, but I want to get feedback from everybody. I want to learn as much before I make a decision. Those are people I would much rather work with. And I actually always like being the last person to talk, not the first in a group discussion.
Interesting.
I much prefer that, even though I have very strong opinions about things, which you probably know. But I would much rather sit in a room and listen to what everyone else has to say, get that data, get their perspectives, and let those inform me and change me, let them influence me before I ever try to influence the direction of where we head somewhere. I think that is an important leadership characteristic. And I think all those things are tied together. That humility that comes with being a good leader.
Covey, I think it was Covey that said, you cannot influence another until you're first influenced by them.
Yeah, same principle.
So you're facilitating the influencing, not to mention extracting the best thinking of the group.
Well, and listen, I also believe that a good leader is going to go hire a team of people that are all smarter than they are in certain areas. And I've surely tried to do that.
What would you say to this generation's crop of entrepreneurs that are given everything they've got to push through their ceiling and to make something happen, and are feeling, all the resistance of someone who's a founder and executing an idea?
There's probably no group of people that I have more respect for and more admiration for than people that are entrepreneurs. I mean, it's just, I love the cloth that they're cut from. They're creative, they're risk takers, they're bold, and they're a little crazy because it's not the easy path in life to go do those things. But
it is not the easy.
It's
path.
not, but it's also like ridiculously rewarding to go build something and do something that has never been done before. I mean, how cool is that? And so you and I both are Stephen Covey fans, but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, he talked about this too, where like a strong purpose and a strong vision of what can be is the absolute best way to cope with adversity and challenge. And so if I see an entrepreneur or a leader of any kind, doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, a leader of any kind that's struggling with things, one of the first questions I'll ask them is like, well, what are you really trying to accomplish? What is, the big purpose? What's your why? And if they can articulate that, it really helps. I think it helps everybody, including themselves. So
clarity is.
Yeah. It is hard though. It's hard to tap into that and to define it for a lot of people. And, but it's really important.
Yeah. We have a model we built on it, and we call it the fight for clarity.
Yeah.
Because it's a fight, isn't it?
Well, because the terrain changes too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I recognized probably about the time I was with you the last time that there was this sort of sea change coming for me. And everyone goes through this.
A sea change.
And what I mean by that is big change coming for me. There were a lot of things that were going to be sunsetting about the same time. My business was being sold that I'd spent 20 years building. So that's sunsetting. My kids are leaving the house, becoming an empty nester. That phase of my life is sunsetting. I knew that my time as a political leader was going to come to an end. And I, say what you want. I loved being in a position of influence as Speaker of the House and working with those great people there. So I knew all of these things that kind of gave me purpose and meaning and kept me busy were all sunsetting at the same time. And I didn't know what I was going to sunrise. I had no idea. It was really interesting to go through that. And I wasn't scared or nervous, but I was super curious about what was going to happen.
One of the things that I can tell you, having worked with so many business leaders, and now in my early 50s, is you think you understand how you're going to feel when certain milestones arrive, and you just have no idea. I have no doubt that Brad was feeling a bit of a loss of an identity. History has a tendency to favor those that are thoughtful, that sit back, that think things through, that aren't rash, and that come up with a plan, that design the future. It doesn't always go the way that they planned, but it does go somewhere on purpose. And that's what happens here with Brad.
And so then I decided to kind of take control of this and define my next chapter. And so I ran for a different political office, put a lot of resources, time, money, effort, emotion into it. It did not happen the way that I originally thought we would engineer it to, right? And because I was going to sunrise something else, right? Mm-hmm. I failed. I mean, it was a loss in every way you would define a loss. And I still remember the moment that I made the kind of deliberate decision knowing I was going to lose that election. And it was about a month before the election. Mm-hmm. And it was a question about whether or not we should put more resources and try to go raise more money. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. This is not meant to be. I can tell it's not meant to be. Something else is going to have to be I'm going to have to spend my time doing something else. The reason I say all of that is that, at times we can see these things coming at us, and all I could see were these things coming to an end, all of which I loved. I love being a dad. I love being a business owner. I love being in politics. And I didn't know what was going to come next. But you just try to kind of win every day. And I tried to, for lack of better description, I'll steal a phrase a friend uses, I decided to play checkers, not chess, for a while, not try to figure things out too much. And lo and behold, other opportunities presented themselves that I think actually were a better fit for me. And I've told people this, and I'll say it again. I think that I won by losing. And so when these things happen in our lives, these setbacks, it's just a moment to sort of reflect, well, all right, how do I pivot? Yeah. And I'm not saying I've got this figured out. I mean, I am, and I've mentioned this to you before, I am really far out of my comfort zone right now in many, many ways. But what a great thing to have at my stage of life, to be out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's just evidence. Isn't it ironic, Brad, that we don't get the wisdom that would have helped us in that moment until the moment we could have used it is over.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just the evidence that
it's terrible.
That's why hindsight is useful, because looking back, we're like, well, I'd do that totally different.
Yeah.
And which means it's the journey.
Yeah.
It's all in this journey. And I think as human beings, I really, with all my heart, believe we have endless capacity.
Yeah.
We will cap ourselves when we stop being open. Mm-hmm. I love that you went through a process to engineer the next chapter, and when that didn't work out,
I failed.
How would you define failure?
I actually hate the word failure because I would just reframe it that it's a learning experience for all of us. And I have such a bad rearview mirror. Like, I turn the page, I think actually sometimes way too fast. I forget the past quickly and I just move on. It drives my spouse crazy at times because I'm always just thinking about, well, that didn't work out. Well, what are we going to do next?
It's a good quality for a leader of people. They'll follow, if you freak out.
Yeah, I'm not a freaker outer, but you know that.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can define failure in a lot of different ways. You made the wrong decisions. I do think this about failure. It absolutely happens. We make mistakes. And there's two sets of people that I think people fall into two camps, generally speaking. There's a camp of people that own their failures. They look internally. They say, what could I have done different? How do I learn from this? What is going to be different in the future so that I don't repeat this failure? There's another group of people, and I hate to sound so judgy, but it's just true, Abe.
Sure.
There's another group of people that externalize the failure. Yeah. It's something or someone else's fault.
Yeah. If it's meant to be, it'll happen.
That's right. And I just think the people that are internalize their failures and learn from them, those are the people I want to be around. Those are the people I want to hire because they're constantly getting better. I have a great friend who says something all the time that I've stolen too. He says, relentless forward progress. Yeah. People that believe in relentless forward progress don't view their mistakes or failures as that big of a deal. They view it as part of relentless forward progress.
Oh, I love that. Who's the friend?
Well, I'm going to tell you.
I believe that those that have a tendency to want to lean into growth and get restless, when it feels like their life is complacent, those people will actually insert positive pressing forward pressure in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's not healthy. They just burn their whole world to the ground. Yeah. But others will, you and I have the same fitness coach. He's brutal. He's sat in that chair. We've had a long conversation.
He's obnoxious.
Yeah. He's obnoxious in all the perfect ways.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the best at what he does.
Absolutely the best.
None of his program is comfortable. I love the results of it. The clarity is freeing.
It's ridiculously simple.
It is.
Ridiculously easy to understand. And there's nobody you can externalize a success or failure on other than yourself.
Yeah.
I
ate that or I didn't eat it.
I know. Right. And I think that's just but those are the kinds of people that I think are the ones that really get stuff done, is they don't externalize their success. They don't externalize their successes either. They don't externalize success or failure on others. They own it.
It is the topic of mental health is interesting right now. I think we're having some important discussions, around it. And there was, for a season, and a long season at that, this sense of, if you struggle mentally, that's weakness. And now we're starting to talk about it. And so I'm wondering, Brad, if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of your thoughts about, in a world where we're algorithmically programmed for conflict, what can people do to stay healthy mentally? And how do you keep yourself from work becoming the only thing that you do in your life?
We, more than ever as individual human beings, need time to just be to ourselves. And I try to take time every day. I don't want to sound like a crazy person, but I try to take time every day to meditate, just for a few minutes, just to breathe and to think. And I believe it affects my physical and my mental health and emotional health in a really positive way. Call it what you want. Some will call it prayer. Some will call it meditation. All those things go together. But it's so important to just have that time every day and reflect on who we are, what we're doing, and to feel who we are. And so I would say that's an important piece of it. And then there's all these other elements that are out there. The world is at war with our mental health right now. The environment that we're in, from technology to the acrimony in our society, the rate of information that's flowing at us. And if we don't take time to slow down and just pause for a few minutes every day and be to ourselves, I think it's really, really hard to be mentally and emotionally strong. And it goes back to that, quote around, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to our level of our systems. If we don't have a system around our mental health, it's going to suffer.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, let's go golfing next year when your shoulder's better.
Yeah, next year.
So, yeah.
Hey, this was fun.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good to see you guys.
I hope that you got as much from Brad as I have. And if you didn't, go listen again. Any leader will be better for listening and cataloging some of these lessons. He has really given us a master class on how to develop as a leader that brings people together. Brad is one of my favorite people on earth and has done a lot to shape me personally. I'm eternally grateful. We do have a problem, and that is I love this watch so much, I'm not sure I can give it to Brad. Just kidding. I'll give it to you, Brad. But boy, it really turned out. Hope you like it. All right, folks, that's it for now. I'm Abe Shreve. We'll see you next time on the Live Consequential podcast, where we explore the stories of those who make consequential decisions and change the world they live in.